Do you ever try to open a door that God has closed? Do you ever try and charge into a season without actually checking whether God has ordained it for you? Momentum without obedience can breed needless conflict, and what we'll see in Deuteronomy chapter 2 is that Israel's instructed detour around Edom and their justified battles with two kings actually allowed them to learn when to pass by in patience and when to trust in God's deliverance. Stay with me till the end of the episode and I'll show you how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ and how to apply this in your everyday life. In this episode of Biblical Unlocks, this show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. So, Deuteronomy chapter 2. Moses is actually going to recount the next stage of Israel's wilderness journey, and God tells them not to harass or contend with Edom, but to pass through its territory peacefully. They avoid conflict at the Emim, which is the with the Emim, which are the giant people in Seir, and they refuse to take Edomite land, and later fight and defeat King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan when God gives them victory. This chapter actually balances restraint, don't needlessly provoke neighbors, with decisive action when God grants victory. And that's what we're going to be seeing in this particular chapter. So, first and foremost, we're going to read the first 9 verses. The focus here is going to be the passing by Edom and the ethics of peaceful passage, and when should we avoid conflict even if we have the power to engage. That's the engagement question. When should we avoid conflict even when we have the power to engage? Okay, let's read. Verse 1. We journeyed back into the wilderness in the direction of the Red Sea, as the Lord had told me, and skirted Mount Seir for many days. Then the Lord said to me, "You have been skirting this hill country for long enough. Head north and charge the people as follows. You're about to pass through the territory of your kindred, the descendants of Esau who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, so be very careful not to engage in battle with them, for I will not give you even so much as a foot's length of their land, since I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. You shall purchase food from them for money so that you may eat. You shall also buy water from them for money so that you may drink. Surely the Lord your God has blessed you in all your undertakings. He knows you're going through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you. You have lacked nothing. So we passed by our kin, the descendants of Esau who live in Seir, leaving behind the root of the Arabah, and leaving behind Elath and Ezion-Geber. When we had headed out along the route of the wilderness of Moab, the Lord said to me, "Do not harass Moab or engage them in battle, for I will not give you any of its land as a possession, since I have given Ar as a possession to the descendants of Lot." Okay, so biblical unlock number 1. What are we seeing here? We're seeing passing by Edom, right? And why does God tell Israel not to harass Edom? I thought they were enemies, right? That's what we had initially anticipated. But God's command to actually pass peacefully shows that not every opportunity for power should be seized. Restraint here preserves the future mission and honors divine timing. And obedience can mean saying not now, even when you could act. Not to mention that the Lord has a promise, a covenant with Esau. It even he says it here, "Since I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession, I will not even give you so much as a foot's length in their land." What does that suggest? God makes promises. God does not fall back on his promises, and God remembers the promises that he has made. So you have to remember that. It applies to everyone that God has made a promise to. Okay, let's read verses 10 to 23 now. We're going to see the focus is the peoples of Seir and why Israel didn't dispossess them. That's going to be the focus here. And my question for you to make sure you stay engaged is, how do we read God's restraint towards some peoples and judgment towards others? Let's read. Verse 10, the Emim, a large and numerous people as tall as the Anakim, had formerly inhabited it. Like the Anakim, they are usually reckoned as Rephaim, though the Moabites call them Emim. Moreover, the Horim had formerly inhabited Seir, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed them, destroying them and settling in their place, as Israel has done in the land that the Lord gave them as a possession. Now then, proceed to cross over the Wadi Zered. So we crossed over the Wadi Zered, and the length of time we had traveled from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Wadi Zered was 38 years, until the entire generation of warriors had perished from the camp, as the Lord had sworn concerning them. Indeed, the Lord's own hand was against them, to root them out from the camp until all had perished, just as soon as all the warriors had died off from among the people. The Lord spoke to me, saying, Today you are going to cross the boundary of Moab at Ar. When you approach the frontier of the Ammonites, do not harass them or engage them in battle, for I will not give the land of the Ammonites to you as a possession, because I have given it to the descendants of Lot. It also is usually reckoned as a land of Rephaim. Rephaim formerly inhabited it, though the Ammonites call them Zamzumim, a strong and numerous people as tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before the Ammonites, so they could dispossess them and settle in their place. He did the same for the descendants of Esau who live in Seir, by destroying the Horites before them, so that they could dispossess them and settle in their place, even to this day. As for the Avim, who had lived in settlements in the vicinity of Gaza, the Caphthorim, who came from Caphthor, destroyed them and settled in their place. So, biblical unlock number 2. If the Emim, as we see here, the Emim were hostile, why not dispossess them, right? So, it seems as if that, like, God is saying, look, these guys are absolutely ruthless, they're relentless, they're hostile, and yet God does not allow Israel to dispossess them. And the reason why is God's purposes sometimes delay dispossession, and that sovereignty over these outcomes doesn't always mean immediate conquest. This narrative teaches discernment. Some encounters are for passage and covenant witness, not just conquest. There must be discernment in one's abilities to navigate these challenges, right? And without it, it seems like you could just go on a bloodthirsty, violent campaign. Okay, let's read verses 24 to 37. The focus here is going to be the war with Sihon and Og. So I just want to point out something here which is important. Moses is recounting things that have already happened, as we saw in Numbers chapter 20 to 21, the defeat of King Sihon, Og, and so on and so forth. All of these things have already happened. In fact, this is what the beginning of the sermon is all about. He's recounting certain events that have already taken place, and we can see a lot of cross-references. So if you want to go back to the episode I did on Numbers chapter 20, you're more than welcome to do so, if that helps you understand this particular passage. But essentially what's happening is we're going to see the focus, again, the war with Sihon and Og, and how we will see divinely granted victory. And the engagement question for this particular section, which is going to be verses 24 to 37, is, when is violent conflict displayed as divinely authorized, and what limits are placed on spoil and conduct? This is the focus that I want you to pay attention to in this section. Proceed on your journey and cross the Wadi Arnon. See, I have handed over to you King Sihon, the Amorite of Heshbon, and his land. Begin to take possession by engaging him in battle. This day I will begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under heaven. When they hear report of you, they will tremble and be in anguish because of you. Verse 26, So I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to King Sihon of Heshbon with the following terms of peace. If you let me pass through your land, I will travel only along the road. I will turn aside neither to the right nor to the left. You shall sell me food for money, so that I may eat, and supply me water for money, so that I may drink. Only allow me to pass through on foot, just as the descendants of Esau who live in Seir have done for me, and likewise the Moabites who live in Ar, until I cross the Jordan into the land that the Lord our God is giving us. But King Sihon of Heshbon was not willing to let us pass through, for the Lord your God had hardened his spirit, and made his heart defiant in order to hand him over to you, as he has now done. The Lord said to me, See, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin now to take possession of his land. So when Sihon came out against us, he and all his people, for battle at Jahaz, the Lord our God gave him over to us, and we struck him down, along with his offspring, and all his people. At that time we captured all his towns, and in each town we utterly destroyed men, women, and children. We left not a single survivor, only the livestock we kept as spoils for ourselves, as well as the plunder of the towns that we had captured, from Aroer on the edge of the Wadi Arnon, including the town that is in the Wadi itself. As far as Gilead, there was no citadel too high for us. The Lord our God gave everything to us. You did not encroach, however, on the land of the Ammonites, avoiding the whole upper region of the Wadi Jabbok, as well as the towns of the hill country, just as the Lord our God had charged. Biblical unlock number 3. Why does God allow and then command war against Sihon and Og? It seems odd, right? Because he's showing restraint and restraint, right? When we're passing through Edom, when we're passing through the peoples of Seir, the Emim, right? All of these seem to suggest a lot of restraint, except at Sihon and Og, right? And why does God allow and then command war against Sihon and Og? Because their hostility actually threatened Israel's life and vocation. God's granting of victory here is actually portrayed as protective. It stops corruption that would endanger the covenant people. The law also regulates conduct and the distribution of spoils so that victory doesn't become lawless plunder. Now, with regards to the point on how these two leaders were actually preventing Israel's vocation, we can actually see here, right? They were trying to go into the land that the Lord our God is giving us, right? And that's in verse 29. But then what we see in verse 30 is the king Sihon of Heshbon was unwilling to let us pass through, for the Lord your God had hardened his spirit. That seems very odd, right? The Lord hardened his spirit and made his heart defiant in order to hand him over to you as he has done now. Now, it may be like, well, hang on, isn't this a little bit unfair? Why would the Lord, the God of Israel, why would he actually prevent why would he harden his heart? It seems like he's the one who's actually in control of him. However, as we saw in Exodus, in the plagues with Pharaoh, God does harden Pharaoh's heart, but only after Pharaoh hardened his own heart. So it's a very striking point that God will give you into your own passions, your own desires, your own feelings, when you have completely cut yourself off from him. And that's what I think is happening here with King Sihon. He hardens his own heart, and then God says, you know what, I'm going to let it be, and I'm going to harden your heart in accordance with your own will, and we'll see what happens. Let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. So, Deuteronomy chapter 2 actually models a tension that the gospel resolves. The disciple must learn both patient restraint, as we saw when passing through Eden, with the peoples of Seir, and non-dispossession, making sure that you have restraint, and also trust-filled actions with the king of Sihon and Og. In Christ, we find the wisdom to pass by with humility and the courage to act when righteousness requires it, because God shows the priority of God's timing and the proper ends of power. The son who refused political shortcuts, you can even see during Matthew chapter 4, his temptation by the devil in the wilderness, right, or in the desert. And it also executes ultimate justice. Christians inherit a posture that waits on God's timing while relying on his deliverance. As we read in Matthew chapter 6 verse 33, "But seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." The idea is, if you seek God's kingdom first, victories will come. But are you seeking immediate victories and using God as a secondary matter, as a sort of backup, someone you take off the bench rather than the star player in your team? I think a really important thing that we all need to practice is discernment and pause. You need to pause before power and practice. Next time you feel justified to act quickly, whether it's argue, expose, or seize an opportunity, you need to stop and ask, is this advancing God's kingdom or is it advancing my control? And the second thing is, especially for discernment, which is what we talked about in this chapter, when considering a decisive move, you need to run it through some filters. Is this aligned with my mission? Is it causing harm or is it graceful? And is there accountability for this? If any fail, you need to rethink your actions. Alright, well, that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. So we learned that God sometimes commands peaceful passage, for example in Edom, so that mission and future justice aren't compromised. And not every hostile people is to be immediately dispossessed. Discernment and divine timing matter. So when God does grant victories, such as at Sihon and Og, the conquest is framed as protective and regulated, not a license for greed. And practically, it's important that we cultivate restraint, test impulses for immediate gain, and align action with God's declared purposes. Next episode, we'll follow Israel's continued approach to the land in Deuteronomy chapter 3. We'll study the final confrontations with Og and the establishment of territorial grants, and ask what settled possession means for a people formed by pilgrimage. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.